Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time the Union and Confederate soldiers suffered through the winter and into February of 1865, as both sides laid for the most part dormant. Now Ulysses S. Grant launches another offensive further west. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Aside from Ulysses S. Grant's attempts during the early stages of the Petersburg campaign to capture the city, Grant had been trying to cut the city off from its supplies. Those attempts resulted in the battles of Jerusalem Plank Road, Globe Tavern, Weldon Railroad, and Boydton Plank Road, to name a few. Grant's seventh offensive took place in early December 1864, where he attempted to destroy more of the Weldon Railroad. Although the Union blocked supplies from going directly into the city using the Weldon Railroad, Confederates would bring supplies as far north as they could, then unload food and ammunition from the train cars, load it onto wagons, and take off in a circuitous route to the city. The seventh offensive was launched to hopefully deter that from happening, but the Confederates just unloaded the train cars further south and took a longer route by wagon. Grant hoped to cut off that longer route in another offensive, his eighth offensive of the campaign. During the winter, both sides grew in number. The campaign in the Shenandoah Valley came to an end, resulting in the Union 6th Corps and the Confederate 2nd Corps returning to the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia, respectively. The Confederate 2nd Corps, once led by the famed Stonewall Jackson, was now commanded by John Brown Gordon. Gordon was a Georgian with no prior military experience. He practiced law before the war and invested in ventures with his father. He saw action in most of the war's Eastern Theater battles, most notably being wounded 5 times at the Battle of Antietam. The resilient Georgian got the attention of his superiors, including Robert E. Lee, leading to his promotion all the way to Corps Commander by the end of 1864. Some of Gordon's troops held the right flank of the Confederate Army outside of Petersburg and would run up against Grant's troops in this eighth offensive by the Union Army. This attack planned by Grant and Army of the Potomac Commander George Meade was designed to simply disrupt the supplies coming into Petersburg, unlike the earlier offensive, which was to take control of those supply routes. Grant envisioned a cavalry raid with infantry support to be the main force in the operation. One cavalry division, the 5th Corps, and troops from the Union 2nd Corps. At 3 a.m. on February 5, 1865, the Union troops began leaving their camps destined for the Boydton Plank Road and the Confederate flank. The 2nd Corps troops arrived first, with Andrew Humphreys, the new Corps commander, placing Gershom Mott's division and Thomas Smith's division to threaten the Confederate position. The West Point trained Humphreys was an accomplished engineer and was close with Jefferson Davis before the war, when Davis was the Secretary of War. Humphreys was chief engineer and a division commander in the Army of the Potomac before taking the job as George Meade's chief of staff. When Winfield Scott Hancock was reassigned away from the Army of the Potomac, Humphreys stepped in to command the 2nd Corps. When Humphreys placed his 2 divisions, a large gap emerged. The Confederate reconnaissance found the gap and informed the division and corps commanders in that sector. Clement Evans' division of Gordon's Corps and Henry Heath's division of A.P. Hill's Corps moved out of their entrenchments, aimed at the gap. The 2nd Corps realized the gap was there and ordered Robert McAllister to fill it. That brigade arrived a little after 4 p.m., when Heath's brigades began making their attack. Heath and his division tried multiple times to dislodge the Yankees from their position, but each time they were thrown back. Artillery fire knocked holes in their battle line, and the musketry from the Federal infantry halted any rebel advance. Evans' division made it to the field later in the fighting. Heath's men took the brunt of the casualties and suffered the worst that day. Heath and Evans withdrew their men when darkness allowed them to slip away without the Federals pursuing. The fighting on the 5th made the Army commander George Meade fear for his troops, so he hurried the 5th Corps and the cavalry division along to support the 2nd Corps. Since the Federals remained fairly inactive through the night and on the morning of February 6th, Robert E. Lee put some of his troops back on the Boydton Plank Road toward Petersburg in order to warm themselves in their camps and get some hot food. However, the troops Lee put on the move toward the city would quickly be recalled. In the afternoon, prodded by Meade, 5th Corps Commander Gouverneur K. Warren probed to the north and west, running into the brigade of John Hoffman of John Pegram's division. Hoffman caught the Federals off guard and began to drive them back, but once Warren's men got their bearings, the Union brigades pushed Hoffman back to Dabney's Mill. As the 5th Corps dealt with one of Pegram's brigades, Pegram's 2 other brigades attacked the Union rear. By this point, Evans' division was now on the field to help Pegram in his battle around Dabney Mill. A back-and-forth battle raged around the mill. One rebel commented, "I have been in more severe engagements. I am sure I never, in all the battles I was in during the war, had so many shots fired directly at me." A Pennsylvanian wrote, "These woods were so dense that it was impossible to see far, and remembering their rough experiences in a similar position on the Weldon Railroad in August, the men were very reluctant about advancing in such a thicket, unless assured of prompt support." 2 brigades from Romaine Ayres' division helped to tip the scale in favor of the Union in the struggle, but Samuel Crawford's men were taking heavy casualties and running low on ammunition. More troops that Lee sent back to Petersburg countermarched back to the flank. Joseph Finnegan led William Mahone's division while that general was on sick leave to the front and pushed back Crawford and Ayres. During the victorious push, Pegram was seen clutching his side. Henry Kyd Douglas jumped down from his own horse and caught Pegram as that general fell from his horse. Pegram died in Douglas's arms. Just over 2 weeks before, Pegram had married a Baltimore socialite named Hetty Carey. The wedding had taken place at St. Paul's Church in Richmond on January 19th. With President Jefferson Davis, his wife Verena, and numerous other generals in attendance. After only a few short weeks of marriage, Hetty was now a widow. Night brought the fighting to an end. A Virginian remembered the horrible night. During the evening, the cooks brought to the men in line of battle a small pone of bread each, the first morsel since early morning. Then these hungry soldiers wrapped their shivering frames into wet blankets and slept as best they could under their brush shelters on the frozen ground, while the pickets paced their beats in front to watch the enemy. General Gordon went to Henry Kyd Douglas to ask him to do a personal mission. "Go tell Hetty Pegram that her husband was killed." Douglas replied, "Heaven, General, I'll lead a forlorn hope, do anything that is war, but not that." Another aide was sent to deliver the message. On February 7th, Warren launched some lackluster attacks against the Confederates around Dabney Mill, gained some ground, and recovered some dead and wounded soldiers. The Battle of Hatcher's Run ended, with the Union suffering 171 killed, 1,181 wounded, and 187 captured or missing, for a total of 1,539. The Confederacy is estimated to have lost around 1,000 men. The failure of the peace commissioners to get independence for the Confederacy left many Confederates weary of war. To help boost morale, President Davis held a rally on February 9th. He wanted Vice President Alexander Stephens to preside over it, but Stephens declined, later saying, "I declined because I could not undertake to impress upon the minds of the people the idea that they could do what I believed to be impossible." Davis used the rally to accomplish 2 goals. One, to try and reinvigorate the Southern populace's energy toward the war effort, and 2, to get support for the enlistment of slaves into the Confederate Army in exchange for their freedom. The controversial move by the Davis administration was finally approved by Congress the next month, but it would have no significant impact. The rally may have reinvigorated the spirits of some in attendance and around the Confederacy, but in the trenches, soldiers began to think the war itself a forlorn hope. A North Carolinian wrote, "We saw nothing before us then but starvation, battles, wounds, and death, as our government would accept nothing but the recognition of the independence of the Southern states, and the Northern government would not do that." A New Yorker, when he heard about the failed peace talks between the Confederate Peace Commission and Abraham Lincoln, wrote, "What hopeless envy, what wounded pride, what deep despair is necessary to hear, tolerate, indulge, or prompt such sentiments. Poor deluded wretches, those Confederates. They will never unite with us again until every hope of success is lost."